So let's continue on and let's start talking about assess and mitigate the vulnerabilities of security architectures, design, and solution elements. So we're going to talk about client-based, server-based stuff, database security, large-scale parallel data systems, sounds fun, distributed systems, and some cryptographic systems as well there on the back end. Not a full-blown thing on cryptography, so that's coming, but we're going to talk about some of the systems we can use. So when we're talking about client-based, we're talking about like desktops and laptops. Could throw mobile devices in here, but we're going to talk about vulnerabilities of mobile devices a little bit later on their own. So I didn't really want to throw it in here just yet. But we want to make sure it has a supported and licensed operating system that's running. All right, that's going to help us with our security. We want to make sure it's updated all the time. Patch management. We have to make sure that these operating systems, or these client-based devices, I should say, are updated all the time. Verified, right? Make sure that what we're updating and what operating system and what applications are verified. And supported malware and antivirus capabilities. Make sure all those are installed, updated, verified, those applications I was talking about. Get your antivirus, the latest and greatest. If you have to pay for one, go pay for one. They have some free ones out there that are pretty decent. If you're in an enterprise type system, more than likely you'll have some type of site license, and that site license will allow you to have antivirus solutions throughout your enterprise. So you could install it on individual systems, and there's many as you need. And not only just your desktops and your laptops, but you could do some of those mobile devices as well. And like I said, we're going to talk about that a little later, but I keep mentioning it because they're client-based too. We're talking about things on this end of the client-server relationship right now. Something else recommended, a host-based intrusion detection system. We want to get that installed. We can have intrusion detection systems, intrusion prevention systems on our network, on the perimeters, right? Guarding the whole infrastructure or trying to protect the whole infrastructure. But remember that term that we keep talking about over and over and over, the layers of security? Right, the defense in depth. This gives us that defense in depth because we're all the way down to the client now. We don't have many more layers between us and the actual data that an attacker is trying to get to. So we want to have multiple layers again. So now we're going to have host-based intrusion detection. You might see it called a HIDS or a HIPS, H-I-D-S and H-I-P-S. Now, we could say the whole drive or sensitive information on the drive is encrypted. We could have strong encryption on our hard drive. Now, you don't have to encrypt the whole entire hard drive. You can just do, like we mentioned, just sensitive data, just certain areas on the drive. You might not want to encrypt the whole drive. That's going to increase your boot time and your access times and things like that. May not be very noticeable to you, but it's there. You will have to put in more credentials when you log in if the operating system is encrypted as well. So there are some pros and cons. You may want to just have a hard drive for your operating systems and applications, and then have a separate drive, physical drive, if you wanted it that way, for your data. So now what you do is encrypt that data drive and leave your applications and operating system alone. So all that data that you're storing now could be encrypted. And we know that encryption gives us that what when it comes to the CIA triad? Confidentiality, right? Because it gives us that privacy, that sense of security that we have that nobody else can see our data. It's private data. Whenever it's possible, make sure that the client operates on a limited account. It doesn't have administrative privileges. We had a term for that, least privilege, right? Only have as many privileges as you need to get the job done. And in enterprises, we do a pretty good job at this, right? We have it where employees may have certain rights to do whatever it is they need to do, but they shouldn't have administrative privileges. Now, if they do, that opens up a vulnerability for you. Let's say your employees in your organization, they all have administrative rights. And me, as a malicious user, I craft an email and send them an email. Hey, click on this link, check out the latest newsletter for the company. And I'll put your logo on there, I make it look real nice. And they click on it to see the latest newsletter. But now they just downloaded a Trojan. Well, that Trojan, or virus, let's say, or worm, whatever I put on there, now has administrative privileges because they opened it as an administrator. So that authorization could get passed on. Get away from the doom and gloom of that, and let's say they just make a mistake. With administrative privileges, they can make some pretty bad mistakes. They could change system files, delete system files, do things to the registry if they got nosy and started poking around. They could install and uninstall applications, maybe taking you out of your licensing agreements. And now your company is, well, it's considered breaking the law now because you're out of that license agreement that you had. You only paid for 100 and now you have this. Or maybe they bring in software that doesn't belong to the company and they got from a friend and they installed it on the computer. The administrative rights, that's a piece of cake. So we want to make sure they don't have administrative privileges. Now, whenever it's possible, a client system that's part of a continuous monitoring program and have it monitoring for vulnerabilities and patches. Always looking for this. We want to have this done without the need of an end user interacting with it, without them having to worry about this. Right? We could use like a network access control where before they attach, when they try to attach to the network, get on the network, it can check the health of that system. And it will go out and say, well, you do have the latest antivirus, but you don't have the latest operating system updates. So I can't let you on the production network. I'm going to put you over here in a holding VLAN or a temporary VLAN, a separate network where you can go get the updates. And once you're done, then you get on the production network, right? So it's trying to minimize our vulnerabilities that we would have in our production network. Changes to the operating system or having new software installed needs to be validated through an assessment process to determine any and all security impacts. So anytime something is going to be installed, we need to make sure we go through that assessment process. And we've done this before. I've done this in past jobs where we get some new software and I may have an exact replica of computer systems that we have in the organization. So what I'll do is install the software there first and test it and make sure everything is okay. Put it through that assessment process to see if everything is cool, right? To see if it's going to play nice. And then once I'm satisfied, then we can push it out. And if it's a site license, again, we can push it out to everybody or the ones that need that program. Now, what about server-based, though? These are pretty popular targets for attackers, all right, because that's where the good stuff is. Now, I'm not saying clients aren't popular targets because they're pretty popular as well, because we know servers have been popular targets for years. This is what they went after first, because well, that's where all the good stuff was, but they're kind of shifting focus. Their ultimate goal is to get the data, say on a back-end server. But now they're looking for the lower hanging fruit. And when I say they, I'm talking about malicious users or attackers. So that low-hanging fruit could be an unpatched workstation, not the hardened server. But we can compromise this workstation and use it to authorize ourselves to maybe get into the server. And it doesn't matter how small we make that server, how hardened we have that server, or patched and just totally secure, if I go in with an authorized user or some authorized credentials. So how can we protect these server-based systems? Well, physical locations. We have to think about where they are. And we're going to talk about physical security here in a little while as well, but physical locations of where our servers are going to be. Do we put them in a dedicated room? Are they sitting on somebody's office desk? Are they in a secure location? What about access control? Kind of goes along with physical locations, right? Of who can get there, who can physically touch that server, the keyboard, the mouse, unplug it, steal it, right? We have to have good access control. Maybe have key swipes, card swipes to get in to the data center or the server room if you don't have a full-blown data center. So we have to be able to monitor and audit and hold people accountable for access control. Patch management, huge one, just like with the client-based systems we talked about, right? We want to make sure that we're patching our servers as well. We have to have patch management though, because we don't want to pull down the latest patch and go ahead and blow it out there. We need to test it, put it in some type of production environment first before we move forward. If it doesn't work, if something conflicts with that patch, third-party software, something we have on there, whatever it is, it may bring down the server. Now that could be a huge problem because now the server's down, which seems like a big problem in itself, but now we're not servicing our customers. We're breaking SLAs, we're breaking contracts with our availability agreements. We're not making any money. This could be a problem after problem after problem just compounding on itself. So make sure that we have some type of patch management in there. So once we apply it, once we test it and then apply it, everything would be good. And then on the back end, best laid plans, right? We need a way to remediate that back, roll it back if there is a problem. So have all that in place, have a plan in place before we have that. We could have network segregation. Put your servers off on a different network. Now, I'm not saying you have to go out and buy a new router and new switches and new firewalls and not a fully physical network, but we could do what? How could we segregate or segment our server systems off of our regular network? That's right, we could use VLANs, those virtual LANs. So we could set up a VLAN and have that be the server VLAN, and that only has server traffic now. And we want to maintain our data flows of how that information is moving throughout our server systems. So data flow control is what we need to talk about. And this controls, or they are controls between components that enforce the data flow to only required recipients. And it's also data flow control is how the communication is protected if we require that. So how it's going to get from where it is to where it's supposed to be, only to the required recipients, not necessarily everybody or unauthorized individuals. So with this, we have the concept of least privilege should be employed. Again, only required recipients. That way we can ensure that data only flows to authorized people or authorized recipients and authorized processes. Now about database security. And yes, you're probably right. You're probably thinking, well, you should have added that in with servers. Yes and no. It is a server. You're absolutely right. But with databases, we go beyond just the server controls, server security we just talked about, because databases are their own little beast, right? They are the targets because of the data that they hold. So there are some security things we need to talk about in there specifically for databases, like inference, aggregation, data mining and data analytics, and warehousing. So if you get into a database server, all right, or if you're a DBA, or if you want to know what a DBA does, I'd go spend a day with them. But inference is the ability to deduce, right? You're inferring, right? You're figuring it out. Sensitive or restricted information from observing available information of what's just out there. You may not be getting the sensitive data necessarily, but you're smart enough, you have maybe detective-like abilities where you can infer or deduce, say, well, they have this and they have this, so they probably have that. So users may be able to determine unauthorized information from what information they can access, and they probably don't ever need to directly access the authorized data. So let's just say, trying to think of an example off the top of my head real quick, but not that this is super sensitive, but what if somebody, you didn't know if somebody had vision problems? Well, if you saw glasses on their desk, you could probably deduce that they have a vision problem. They wear glasses, so they may have a vision problem. You don't know if they're nearsighted or farsighted or know much about it, but you have a piece of that puzzle, right? What if, okay, thinking about their desk still, what if you walked by and you saw a medicine bottle on the desk? Well, if you saw the type of medicine it is, and you knew what it was, or you could obviously go look it up, now you may know, well, this is used to treat whatever. And now you can deduce that they possibly have this illness or disease or whatever just by that piece of the puzzle. You didn't talk directly to them. You didn't get their medical chart or go to the doctor with them. But again, you're figuring it out. Now, this is one of the hardest threats to control because of things like that. You're thinking about, and not just you, I do the exact same thing, and a lot of IT professionals do this. They see the ultimate goal, right? So the ultimate goal in those scenarios would be, what illness does that employee have? So we're guarding that, right? We've got controls in place. We've got encryption on the files. We have the filing cabinet lock where it's printed out. It's in the doctor's, we secure that down. But we may not think about other ways to think about how to get there, like the medicine bottle. How are we supposed to control that? How would a doctor control that? You can't. You have to rely on the subject or the end user for that. Just like we would have to rely on the end user for something. So we got to spend time in the business. Get to know the processes so you can think outside of the box a little bit. Spend the necessary time with data or business owners on how they do things. And then kind of look at it from a different angle. And say, well, if I knew this and that, I might be able to figure out your sensitive data. So what can we do to minimize that? What can we do to mitigate that? Maybe not give certain information out that could point back to this, or redo different processes. It just depends on what it is that you're looking at, but that's what inference is. And then aggregation. This is combining non-sensitive data from separate sources to create the sensitive information. So us, as IT pros, security practitioners, whatever label you want to wear that day, we need to understand the fields and the types of information that's present in the database. We have to be able to get in there, like I said, spend time with the DBA. I wasn't really being all that funny about it, but we need to know what's in the database so we can help them secure that down. We also need to understand the possible combinations of the information, including the combinations which may result in escalation of sensitivity. So that way, again, we need to spend time there. We need to have hands-on data, if that's allowed, by the way. And step back. Again, look at it from a different angle and see literally see if we can deduce and figure out what's going on. Maybe say, well, I can put that and that together. I can aggregate this information. And that may be a problem. And then warehousing. Warehousing is a huge thing nowadays, right? This is a repository for information that's collected from a variety of data sources. So it is a huge, I don't want to call it a warehouse because that's what we're calling it, warehousing, but it could be a huge facility, literally, physically a huge facility with racks and racks and racks of servers. And they're storing data. Tons and tons of data. Now, this data that's stored is not used for necessarily operational tasks. We're not using it for customer service. The sales department is not getting in there and using that particular data for, trying to make sales or target advertisements or anything. This is for analytical purposes. So the data warehouse combines all of the data from various databases into one large container. So it looks physically, there's lots, but it looks like one big container of data. Got a big 55-gallon drum of data, right? That's warehousing. And that data comes from everywhere. Logs, web browsing history, purchasing history, right? When you scan your credit card, you go buy something at the department store and you scan it. That data is being saved. When you bought it, what you bought, what store you bought it from, what location, like city and state, your name or some type of identification is going to be tied to you. All those transactions, they warehouse this stuff because they need that data. So what do they need that data for? This very thing right here, data mining and data analytics. Data, you hear that on TV all the time, right? Data analytics. We have data analytics because now we know this and we know that. And they do. This is discovering information in those warehouses by running queries on the data, all right? So we have that huge repository and we're going to start running query, asking that data questions. So a large repository, that warehouse is going to be required. That's why we have to do the warehousing first. And then we're going to run these queries to look for relationships, patterns, trends in the data warehouse of, well, I see every Saturday, Steve goes to this department store and he gets this, this, and this. So maybe on Thursday or Friday, we can send an ad for something. I'm not saying, let's say, let me give us an example here. Let's say Steve goes to the store and he's going to buy some hamburgers and some hamburger buns and maybe frozen French fries. He buys that every weekend because he grills out every Sunday for the games. All right, so he has that. So we see this pattern. We see this trend. So what we may do, like on Thursday or Friday or Wednesday, we could send Steve an email or an advertisement somehow, even in the mail, printed mail. Send an advertisement, and we're going to advertise things that go with hamburgers and French fries or chips or something like that. He may get an advertisement for soda, for hot dogs, for the deli of that department store or grocery store, for potato salad, maybe some sales for baked beans, picnic equipment, plastic cups, bags of ice. What else goes with outside? Charcoal, if he has that type of grill. The gas, maybe he has gas grill, gas containers, the things we clean our grill with. Patio furniture, right? Brand new patio furniture. That would look good outside when you're grilling and have everybody out. So they look for these patterns and these trends so they know what to send you. I had a friend on Facebook, right? And one day she said something about she did not realize this one particular department store was tracking everything she was doing. Right? She just had a baby. They knew this. They figured it out from the trends because what she was buying beforehand. So they started sending her ads and emails about diapers and wipes and the onesies, right? The little baby outfits, little socks, and looking forward, cribs and strollers and everything like that, because they knew from data analytics that she had just had a baby, and they even knew if it was a boy or a girl, just from all of this data that they are collecting. So they could have got that data from her credit cards. If somebody signed her up on the registry and people were scanning things on the registry, they can tie that back. They may be able to get stuff from the local hospitals. You have to really step back and think about the amount of data that's out there that's flowing through the world that these data analytics take into consideration. All this data mining, they're just grabbing everything they can. And if they don't need it, they just won't use it. But they may, right? Because they're going to have analytical techniques, and it's taken from the fields in mathematics, statistics, cybernetics, and genetics. I mean, we're talking some high-level stuff here, things that are beyond me, right? I'm no genius mathematician. These folks are that come up with this data analytics. That way, they know what you need, probably before you do. And it's going to get to the point pretty soon where they're going to know when you're out of milk and when you're out of soda and when you're out of water and bread and eggs and things that you're going to need. And they might just start shipping it to you. And here comes the drones, right? Now I'm getting off topic there, but that's analytics. They're going to know, or they do know, what you need. That's why they're looking for those patterns. Now we also have large-scale parallel data systems. Now these take large amounts of information, kind of like what we've been talking about, but they break it up. They break up the processing of this information to separate systems. They're like they're spreading the love around, right? I've got a big task to do, but if I can get some help, and you can help, and they can help, and you can help, we can do it faster, right? It's more efficient. It's quicker for us on the back end. Right? We see those math problems all the time, right? If John can dig a 2-foot hole in 1 hour, how fast can John, Mark, Steve, and Larry dig the same hole, right? 20 minutes or whatever. Same thing here, parallel data systems. Now, bad thing about these is that since we're spreading the love around, we have communications to this system and this system and this system and this system. Vulnerabilities are shared by everybody now. So if we get or give information to somebody that may have a vulnerability, that may introduce a vulnerability to us. I've probably said it before, but you're only as strong as your weakest link. We have lots of links in this one, depending. May have 4 or 5, may have 2. But if they have a vulnerability and I don't, that makes them the weak link, and they may compromise me now. So we have to be mindful of that when it comes to parallel data systems. And then we also have something called distributed systems. These guys have been around for a while too. It's kind of hard for me to jump on board with this one just because I look at it from a security standpoint. But cloud computing, they outsource IT infrastructures all the time, storage all the time, or applications to third-party providers. Now, what distributed systems do is they imply a geographic diversity of your computing resources. So we could have them in different regions, and we're servicing our customers more efficiently that way. So the goal of cloud computing is to allow large providers to leverage their economies of scale to provide computing resources to other companies that typically pay for these services, and they're based on their usages. So that's how cloud providers or cloud computing, that's how they make their money, is through these distributed systems that are out there on the internet or the global web for us.